Billionaire divorced for 8 months froze in shock. When he saw his ex leaving the hospital with a newborn, before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Oh, and make sure to follow our channel for more stories like this. Now, sit back and enjoy every detail. Asher Wallace adjusted his platinum cufflinks as he stepped out of his midnight black Bentley Continental, the late afternoon sun casting sharp shadows across the hospital's pristine entrance. At 36, he commanded attention without trying. 6'3" with athletic shoulders that filled his tailored charcoal suit perfectly, dark brown hair meticulously styled, and piercing blue eyes that had closed million-dollar deals with a single glance. His jawline was sharp enough to cut glass, and his presence radiated the kind of confidence that only came from building an empire from nothing. 8 months. That's how long it had been since he'd signed the divorce papers that ended his marriage to Riley Moore. 8 months since he'd walked away from the only woman who'd ever made him question whether success was worth the loneliness that came with it. He wasn't supposed to be here today. Hell, he hadn't been to a hospital since his grandfather's last checkup 2 years ago. But Harold Wallace, 84 and stubborn as the day was long, had insisted on keeping his cardiology appointment, despite Asher's protests about sending the family driver instead. A man handles his own business, his grandfather had said, the same words that had built their software empire. Even if that business is admitting he's getting old, Asher pushed through the glass doors, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished floors. The antiseptic smell hit him immediately, bringing back memories he'd rather forget. The night his father had his first heart attack. The morning his mother had been diagnosed with breast cancer. Hospitals were places where control slipped through your fingers like sand, where all the money in the world couldn't guarantee the outcomes you wanted. He was checking his watch, calculating how long this appointment would take and whether he could still make his 4 o'clock conference call with the Tokyo office. When he saw her, Riley, the world stopped spinning. She was walking slowly toward the hospital's exit, her auburn hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that caught the light streaming through the windows. Even in an oversized gray hoodie and dark jeans, she was beautiful. The kind of beautiful that had made him forget his own name the first time he'd seen her at that charity gala 3 years ago. Her green eyes, the color of sea glass, were focused downward on something she was carrying. Something small, something that made soft, muffled sounds. A baby. Asher's breath caught in his throat. The baby was wrapped in a pale blue blanket, tiny fists peeking out as Riley adjusted her hold. An elderly woman with silver hair walked beside her, carrying a small overnight bag and speaking in hushed, gentle tones. As if sensing his stare, Riley looked up. Their eyes met across the bustling lobby, and the color drained from her face. She stopped walking, her lips parting slightly in shock. The baby, he could see it clearly now, had dark hair like his own and pale skin that seemed almost translucent in the hospital lighting. The child couldn't be more than a few days old, and something about the shape of the tiny nose, the curve of the ears, made Asher's pulse hammer against his ribs. He moved toward them without conscious thought, his feet carrying him across the marble floor as conversations and footsteps faded into white noise around him. Riley's eyes followed his approach, wide with something that looked like fear mixed with exhaustion. "Riley," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. She looked fragile standing there, shadows beneath her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and pain he hadn't been there to share. What are you? Asher." Her voice was barely above a whisper. The baby shifted in her arms, making a small sound that went straight through his chest. "I didn't know you'd be... Is that..." The word stuck in his throat. He gestured toward the baby, unable to form the question that was burning through his mind like acid. Riley's grandmother. He recognized her now from the wedding photos. Stepped closer to Riley's side, her weathered face protective and wary. "Riley, dear, we should get going. The car is waiting." But Asher couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't think beyond the impossibility of what he was seeing. The baby's eyes were closed, but when a small hand escaped the blanket, he saw familiar long fingers, the same ones he saw every morning when he shaved in the mirror. "Riley, please." His voice cracked. "Is he mine?" The question hung between them like a live wire. Riley's eyes filled with tears. She was clearly fighting not to shed. Her grip tightened on the baby, and for a moment, Asher thought she might run. "Yes," she whispered. The single word hit him like a physical blow. He actually took a step backward, his hand reaching for something to steady himself against. A baby, his baby, a son. If the blue blanket was any indication, Riley had been pregnant when they divorced and she hadn't told him. How long? He managed. He's 3 days old. Riley's voice grew stronger, but he could hear the tremor beneath it. His name is Noah. Noah. Their son's name was Noah, and Asher was learning it for the first time in a hospital lobby instead of a delivery room. Instead of holding Riley's hand through contractions, instead of cutting the cord, instead of being the first person to hold his child. Why didn't you tell me? The question came out harsher than he meant it to, and he watched Riley flinch. Because you made it clear that children weren't part of your plan, she said, lifting her chin with the defiance he'd always both loved and feared. Because every time I brought up the possibility of having a family, you changed the subject, or found an excuse to leave the room. Because I was tired of feeling like I was asking for something impossible. The truth of her words cut deep. How many times had she mentioned wanting children? How many times had he deflected, claiming they needed to focus on the business, on their careers, on everything except the family she'd dreamed of building with him? I would have... What? You would have what, Asher? Riley's voice rose slightly, causing a few people to glance in their direction. The baby stirred at the sound, and she immediately lowered her voice, swaying gently to settle him. You would have rearranged your entire life? Canceled business trips to Japan and Singapore? Actually come home for dinner instead of working until midnight every night? Each accusation was a knife between his ribs, precise and devastating because they were true. He had chosen work over her, over them, over the possibility of this. And now he was standing in a hospital lobby staring at everything he'd lost without even knowing it existed. I would have tried, he said quietly. Riley studied his face for a long moment and he saw something shift in her expression.
I'm good.
Not forgiveness. It was too soon for that, but maybe the faintest crack in the wall she'd built between them. I have to go, she said finally. He needs to eat, and I need to rest. Where are you staying? The question was out before he could stop it. Riley hesitated, glancing at her grandmother. With Grandma Evelyn, in Millbrook, 45 minutes outside the city, in the house where Riley had spent summers as a child. He'd visited there once during their marriage, for Evelyn's 80th birthday. It was a small, cozy place with a garden and a front porch swing. Everything his penthouse apartment wasn't. He stopped, unsure what he was even asking for. To visit? To be part of this? To somehow undo 8 months of separation and 3 days of missed fatherhood? I need time, Asher, Riley said softly. I need to figure out how to be a mother. And you need to figure out if this is really what you want, because I won't let you walk in and out of his life whenever it's convenient for you. The dismissal stung, but he couldn't argue with it. She was protecting their son, his son, from the same inconsistency that had destroyed their marriage. Riley shifted Noah to one arm and reached for the overnight bag her grandmother was carrying. As she did, the baby's blanket slipped slightly, and Asher caught a glimpse of a perfect tiny face, rosebud lips, and dark eyelashes against pale cheeks. His chest tightened with an emotion he didn't have words for. He's beautiful, he whispered. Riley's expression softened for just a moment. He has your stubborn chin. Despite everything, Asher almost smiled. Almost. But then Riley was walking away, her grandmother's protective arm around her shoulders, carrying his son toward a life he wasn't part of. He watched until they disappeared through the automatic doors, until the black sedan pulled away from the curb and disappeared into traffic. He stood there for a long time, people flowing around him like he was a stone in a river, while his world rearranged itself around this new, impossible reality. He was a father. He had a son named Noah, and he had no idea how to fix the mess he'd made of everything that mattered. Would you have made the same choice Riley did, keeping such life-changing news to yourself to protect both yourself and your child from potential heartbreak? The penthouse apartment that had once been Asher's sanctuary now felt like a mausoleum. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city's glittering skyline, but tonight the lights blurred together as he stood with a tumbler of whiskey in his hand, untouched and growing warm. The silence was deafening. No crying, no soft breathing, no gentle humming of lullabies that should have filled the space. 3 days. It had been 3 days since the hospital, and Asher hadn't slept more than an hour at a time. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Riley's exhausted face, the way she'd held Noah so protectively, the accusation in her green eyes when she'd asked if he would have actually changed his life for them. He set the whiskey down on the granite countertop without taking a sip and pulled out his phone. Riley's contact information was still there. He'd never had the heart to delete it. His thumb hovered over her name for the dozenth time that day, but what could he possibly say? Sorry, I missed the birth of our son because I was too scared to commit to the family you wanted. The phone buzzed in his hand, making him jump. Marcus Chen, his business partner and the closest thing he had to a best friend, was calling. You missed the board meeting, Marcus said without preamble when Asher answered. I know. You also missed the conference call with London and the product review. And apparently you've been ignoring emails for 3 days. Marcus paused. What's going on? This isn't like you. Asher walked to the window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. I saw Riley. Marcus had been there through the divorce, had watched Asher throw himself into work with an obsession that bordered on self-destruction. How is she? She had a baby. The words felt foreign in his mouth, like speaking a language he'd never learned. Our baby. A son. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Asher wondered if the call had dropped. Jesus, Marcus finally breathed. When? 3 days ago. She never told me she was pregnant. Asher's free hand clenched into a fist against the window. I found out by accident, saw her leaving the hospital. Asher, I'm so sorry, I can't imagine. I have a son, Marcus. His name is Noah, and I don't know anything about him. I don't know if he's healthy, if the delivery was difficult, if Riley's okay. I don't know what his cry sounds like or how he feels when he sleeps. His voice cracked. I don't know anything. Another pause. Then, what are you going to do? I don't know. The admission felt like defeat. She's staying with her grandmother in Millbrook. She said she needs time, and she's right. I have no idea how to be a father. I can barely manage my own life. That's bullshit, Marcus said firmly. You built a multi-billion-dollar company from nothing. You've solved problems that would have destroyed other men. You're not helpless, Asher. You're scared. The truth of it hit like a physical blow. He was scared. Terrified, actually. Of failing Noah the way he'd failed Riley. Of being the kind of father who was too busy to show up. Too focused on providing to actually be present. What if I'm like him? Asher whispered. What if I can't be what they need? Marcus knew who he meant. Richard Wallace, Asher's father, had been a brilliant businessman and a terrible parent. Present in body but absent in every way that mattered. More interested in building wealth than building relationships with his children. You're not your father, Marcus said with conviction. Richard Wallace never questioned whether he was doing right by his family. The fact that you're terrified of screwing this up tells me you won't. After ending the call, Asher found himself in his home office staring at the framed photo on his desk. It was from their honeymoon in Tuscany, Riley laughing at something he'd said, her hair catching the golden light of the Italian sunset, her left hand displaying the wedding ring that had cost more than most people's cars but had meant less to him than the simple act of putting it on her finger. He'd loved her. God help him. He still loved her. But love hadn't been enough to make him the husband she deserved, and now it might not be enough to make him the father his son needed. His laptop chimed with an incoming email, the quarterly projections he was supposed to review, no doubt, or another crisis that required his immediate attention. But for the first time in his professional life, he closed the laptop without looking. Meanwhile, 45 minutes away in Millbrook, Riley sat in her grandmother's rocking chair, Noah sleeping peacefully in her arms. The soft creak of the wooden rockers filled the quiet living room, a soothing rhythm that had helped her through countless sleepless nights as a child when her parents' marriage had been falling apart. He's a beautiful baby, Grandma Evelyn said softly, settling into the armchair across from them with 2 cups of chamomile tea. At 84, she still moved with grace, her silver hair always perfectly styled, her blue eyes sharp with the wisdom of 8 decades. He looks just like Asher, Riley murmured, tracing Noah's tiny features with her fingertip. Same chin, same nose. I keep waiting for him to open his eyes so I can see if he has Asher's blue eyes too. And how do you feel about that? Riley's hand stilled. Terrified, heartbroken, angry. She looked up at her grandmother. I spent 9 months convincing myself I was doing the right thing by not telling him. Now I see the look on his face at the hospital and I wonder if I was just being cruel. You were protecting yourself, Evelyn said gently. And protecting this little one. There's no shame in that. But what if I was wrong? What if he would have stepped up, been different? What if he wouldn't have? Evelyn's voice was kind but firm. Honey, you lived with that man for 3 years. You know better than anyone what his priorities were. The question now isn't whether you made the right choice then. It's what you're going to do moving forward. Noah stirred in Riley's arms, making the soft mewling sounds that meant he was getting hungry. She shifted him to her shoulder, breathing in his sweet baby scent that somehow made everything else in the world seem manageable. He wants to be involved, Riley said. I could see it in his eyes. But wanting something and being capable of it are two different things. People can change, Evelyn offered, but only if they truly want to, and only if they're willing to do the hard work. Riley stood to prepare Noah's bottle, her body still aching from the delivery. 3 days postpartum, and she was exhausted in ways she hadn't known were possible. Every muscle hurt. Her emotions were a raw tangle of hormones and fear and overwhelming love for the tiny person who depended on her for everything. As she warmed the bottle, her phone buzzed with a text message. Her heart jumped, thinking it might be Asher, but it was her friend Jennifer from work. Heard through the grapevine that you had the baby. Congratulations. When can we meet him? Riley stared at the message, realizing that her entire support system was built around people who thought she was a single mother by choice, not by circumstance. She'd been so focused on keeping her pregnancy secret from Asher that she'd isolated herself from almost everyone else too. She typed back, "Thank you. Still recovering. We'll let you know soon." It wasn't entirely a lie. She was recovering. From childbirth, from heartbreak, from the shock of seeing Asher's face when he'd realized Noah was his son. But she was also hiding, and she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep doing it. Noah's cry pierced the quiet kitchen, urgent and demanding. Riley hurried back to him, settling into the rocking chair to feed him.
Let's go.
As he latched onto the bottle, his tiny hand curling around her finger, she felt the familiar surge of fierce protectiveness that had surprised her with its intensity. "I won't let anyone hurt you," she whispered to him. "Not even your daddy, if he's not ready to put you first." Outside, the first snow of the season began to fall, dusting the small town in pristine white. Inside the warm house, Riley rocked her son and tried not to think about the man who was probably lying awake in his empty penthouse, staring at the ceiling and wondering how to bridge the gap between the father he wanted to be and the father he was afraid he'd become. The sound of a car door slamming in the driveway made Riley's heart skip a beat. She glanced at the clock on Grandma Evelyn's mantelpiece. 10:30 in the morning. Too early for the mailman, too random for visitors in a town where everyone knew everyone else's schedule. Noah was finally napping after a difficult night of fussing, and Riley had just managed to shower for the first time in 2 days. Her auburn hair was still damp, twisted into a messy bun, and she wore her most comfortable pair of black leggings and an oversized cream sweater that had belonged to her grandfather. She felt human again, which was saying something for a woman 5 days postpartum. The doorbell rang, a soft chime that somehow felt ominous in the quiet house. Evelyn was at her book club meeting, leaving Riley alone with Noah and her scattered nerves. She peered through the lace curtains and felt her breath catch in her throat. Asher stood on the front porch, looking completely out of place against the backdrop of Evelyn's garden gnomes and cheerful yellow door. He wore dark jeans that probably cost more than most people's rent, and a navy cashmere sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and he held a large shopping bag in one hand and what looked like a car seat in the other. Riley's first instinct was to pretend she wasn't home, but Asher had already seen her silhouette in the window. Their eyes met through the glass, and she saw something in his expression that stopped her from hiding. Vulnerability mixed with determination, the look of a man who'd made a decision and was seeing it through despite his fears. She opened the door slowly, keeping one hand on the frame as if it could anchor her to solid ground. "Hi," he said, his voice softer than she remembered. "I know you said you needed time, and I'm not here to pressure you. He held up the shopping bag. "I brought some things for Noah." Riley's eyes moved to the car seat, which she now realized was top of the line, the kind she'd looked at online but couldn't afford. "Asher, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did." He set the car seat down carefully. "I've missed 5 days of his life already. I can't get those back, but I can make sure he has everything he needs going forward." The earnestness in his voice caught her off guard. This wasn't the Asher she remembered, the one who solved problems with money and expected gratitude in return. This was different. Raw. "Come in," she said, stepping back from the doorway. "But please keep your voice down." He just fell asleep. Asher nodded and followed her into the living room, his expensive shoes silent on Evelyn's hardwood floors. The house felt smaller with him in it, his presence filling spaces that had seemed perfectly adequate moments before. He set the shopping bag on the coffee table and looked around, taking in the family photos on the walls, The handmade quilts draped over furniture, the general sense of warmth and belonging that money couldn't buy. This is nice, he said, and she could tell he meant it. Cozy. It's home, Riley replied, settling onto the sofa where she had a clear view of the portable bassinet where Noah slept. At least for now. Asher sat in the armchair across from her, careful not to make noise. How is he? How are you? The simple question threatened to undo her. When was the last time someone had asked how she was and actually waited for an honest answer? Tired, she admitted. Everything hurts, and I cry at commercials. But he's perfect, Asher. He's absolutely perfect. Can I see him? Riley hesitated, then nodded toward the bassinet. Just don't wake him up. I finally got him down an hour ago. Asher moved to the bassinet with the careful steps of someone navigating a minefield. When he looked down at Noah, his entire face transformed. The sharp edges of his business persona melted away, leaving behind something softer, more human. His hand hovered over the baby for a moment before he gently touched Noah's tiny fist with one finger. My God, he whispered. He's so small, 7 pounds 2 ounces, Riley said. The doctor said that's perfect for his gestational age. Gestational age, Asher repeated, as if testing the words. I don't know any of this stuff, Riley. I don't know about gestational ages or feeding schedules or when babies are supposed to do what. I bought a dozen books on the way here, but reading about it and actually doing it are different things. Riley watched him study their son with an intensity that was almost painful to witness. Nobody knows what they're doing at first. I've read every parenting book ever written, and I still panic when he cries. Noah stirred in his sleep, his face scrunching up in the way that usually preceded a full-blown crying fit. Both parents froze, waiting to see if he'd settle back down. When he did, they both exhaled in relief. What's in the bag? Riley asked, nodding toward his purchases. Asher returned to his chair, running a hand through his hair. Probably too much. Clothes, diapers, blankets. There was this saleswoman at the baby store who kept suggesting things, and I didn't know what you already had. So I just said yes to everything. Despite everything, Riley felt her lips twitch with the hint of a smile. You went to a baby store? 3 of them, actually. Did you know there are 17 different types of bottles? And don't get me started on the stroller situation. I had to call Marcus to come help me decide. The image of Asher Wallace, billionaire CEO, standing bewildered in a baby store while Marcus Chen helped him choose between stroller models was so absurd that Riley actually laughed. The sound surprised them both. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I'm not laughing at you, it's just, this whole situation is so surreal. Tell me about it. Asher leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. Riley, I know I have no right to ask this, but can you tell me about the pregnancy? About what it was like? The question hung between them, loaded with months of missed opportunities and shared experiences that would never happen. Riley wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. It was hard, she said finally. The first trimester, I was sick all the time. I lost 8 pounds because I couldn't keep anything down. I kept thinking about calling you, but then I'd remember the last fight we had about children and I'd lose my nerve. Asher's face tightened with something that looked like physical pain. What did the doctor say? About the weight loss? That it was normal. Unpleasant, but normal. It got better around week 14. Riley found herself talking to her hands rather than looking at him. That's when I started showing. Just a little. I had to buy new work clothes. You were still working? Until week 36. I'm a graphic designer, remember? I can work from anywhere. She finally looked up at him. I set up a home office in Grandma's spare room. Small clients, freelance projects, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills. Riley, you should have told me. I would have helped with money. I didn't want your money, Asher. Her voice was quiet but firm. I wanted my husband. I wanted the father of my baby to be excited about his child, not treating pregnancy like a problem to be solved with a checkbook. The words hit their target. Asher sat back as if she'd slapped him, and for a moment the only sound in the room was Noah's soft breathing. You're right, he said finally. You're absolutely right, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of it, for not listening when you tried to talk about having children, for making you feel like you couldn't tell me about Noah, for not being the man you needed me to be. Riley felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She'd imagined this conversation 100 times during the long nights of her pregnancy, but hearing the actual words was different than she'd expected. There was no defensiveness in his apology, no attempt to justify his past behavior. I can't undo the last 9 months, Asher continued, but I want to do better going forward. I want to learn how to be Noah's father, If you'll let me try. Before Riley could respond, Noah woke up with the kind of cry that meant he was hungry and had no intention of being patient about it. She moved to pick him up, and Asher watched as she settled him against her shoulder, swaying gently while she prepared his bottle. "Can I hold him?" Asher asked quietly. Riley paused, bottle in hand. This was the moment she'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. She looked at Asher's face, seeing hope and terror warring in his expression, and made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. "Sit back," she said. "Support his head and neck. He's stronger than he looks, but he's still fragile." She placed Noah in his father's arms for the first time, adjusting Asher's hold until it felt secure. The baby fussed for a moment, then settled against Asher's chest as if he belonged there. Asher stared down at his son with an expression of wonder and terror that made Riley's heart ache. "Hi, Noah," he whispered. "I'm your dad. I know I'm late, but I'm here now." And watching them together, her ex-husband and their son, both looking lost and found at the same time, Riley felt something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of possibility. 2 weeks had passed since Asher first held Noah, and he'd fallen into an unexpected routine of daily visits to Millbrook. Every morning at 10, his Bentley would pull into Evelyn's driveway, and every morning Riley would feel her pulse quicken despite her best efforts to remain guarded. Today was different. Today, Asher arrived at 9:15 looking like he hadn't slept. His usually immaculate appearance replaced by day-old stubble and a wrinkled button-down shirt that suggested he'd slept in his clothes. His hair was disheveled, and there were dark circles under his blue eyes that spoke of exhaustion deeper than physical tiredness. "You look terrible," Riley said when she opened the door, then immediately regretted her bluntness. "I mean, are you okay?" "Board meeting ran until 3 a.m., Asher said, rubbing his face with both hands. "Emergency session. One of our biggest clients is threatening to pull their contract, and Marcus thinks there might be industrial espionage involved." Riley stepped aside to let him in, noticing the way his shoulders sagged with fatigue. The old Asher would have thrived on this kind of crisis, would have been energized by the challenge and the late nights. This version looked defeated. "Maybe you should go home and sleep," she suggested gently. "Noah will still be here tomorrow." "No." The response was immediate and firm. "I've already missed too much. I'm not missing any more days with him." There was something almost desperate in his voice that made Riley's chest tighten. Over the past 2 weeks, she'd watched Asher transform from the confident businessman she'd married into someone tentative and eager, hanging on her every word about diaper changes and feeding schedules like his life depended on memorizing them correctly. Noah was awake in his bassinet, making the soft cooing sounds that had become Riley's favorite music. Asher moved to him immediately, his exhaustion seeming to lift slightly as he looked down at their son. "Hey, buddy," he murmured, reaching down to stroke Noah's cheek with one finger. "Did you have a good night? Your mom says you're starting to sleep for longer stretches." 3 hours last night, Riley confirmed, settling onto the sofa with her morning coffee. "Dr. Martinez says that's excellent for 3 weeks old." Asher nodded, absorbing this information like gospel. He'd started keeping a notebook where he wrote down everything Riley told him about Noah, feeding times, sleep patterns, developmental milestones to watch for. The first time she'd seen him pull it out, she'd found it endearing. Now it was starting to worry her. "Asher," she said carefully, "you know you don't have to memorize everything, right? Parenting isn't a test you can study for, isn't it?" He looked up from Noah with the expression that was part exhaustion, part genuine confusion. "I feel like I'm failing at everything else in my life right now. At least with Noah. If I pay attention and follow the rules, maybe I can get something right." Before Riley could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Dr. Martinez's office, and she answered quickly, always anxious about any call that might concern Noah's health. "Ms. Moore? This is Jessica from Dr. Martinez's office. We need to reschedule Noah's appointment for Friday. The doctor had a family emergency come up." "Of course," Riley said, but her voice caught slightly. Friday's appointment was supposed to be Noah's 1-month checkup, and she'd been looking forward to hearing that everything was progressing normally. "When can we reschedule?" "Unfortunately, Dr. Martinez is going to be out for 2 weeks. We can refer you to Dr. Patterson in the practice, or you can wait until Dr. Martinez returns." Riley felt a familiar spike of anxiety. Dr. Martinez had delivered Noah and had been the one constant in her prenatal care. The idea of switching doctors, even temporarily, made her stomach clench with worry. Let me think about it and call you back, she said, ending the call. What's wrong? Asher asked immediately, picking up on her distress. Noah's appointment got canceled. His regular doctor is out for 2 weeks. Riley rubbed her temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. I know it's silly, but Dr. Martinez knows his case, knows his birth history. Starting over with someone new feels scary, Asher finished. It's not silly at all. He was quiet for a moment, then pulled out his phone. What if I made some calls? I know some excellent pediatricians in the city. We could get him seen by someone really good, maybe even today. Asher, no. Riley's response was sharper than she intended. I don't want him to be just another VIP patient because his father has money. Dr. Martinez is a good doctor, and Noah isn't an emergency case that needs to jump the line. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. Riley stood up, pacing to the window. It's what you always mean. When there's a problem, you throw money at it until it goes away. But some things can't be fixed with your checkbook and your connections. The accusation hung in the air between them, cutting and familiar. It was the same fight they'd had dozens of times during their marriage, just with different details. You're right, Asher said quietly, and Riley turned to look at him in surprise. The old Asher would have defended himself, would have pointed out that his resources could genuinely help. I'm sorry, I'm tired, and I defaulted to what I know how to do instead of what you actually need. The simple acknowledgement of her feelings deflated Riley's anger as quickly as it had risen. She returned to the sofa, feeling suddenly drained. I'm scared too, she admitted. Every day I'm terrified that I'm doing something wrong, that I'm going to hurt him somehow. And I know logically that one doctor's appointment doesn't make or break anything, but when it comes to Noah, logic doesn't really apply. Asher finished. I get it, I really do. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both watching Noah, who seemed blissfully unaware of his parents' anxiety. Then Asher spoke again, his voice thoughtful. What if we called Dr. Martinez's office back and asked Dr. Patterson about his experience with newborns? Not to get special treatment, just to get information so you can make an informed decision? Riley considered this. It was practical without being presumptuous, and it acknowledged her concerns without dismissing them. That's actually a good idea, she said. I have them occasionally, Asher replied with a tired smile. As if sensing the lighter mood, Noah made a small sound that might have been a laugh or might have been gas. But either way, it made both parents smile. Riley reached for him, lifting him from the bassinet and settling him against her shoulder. Do you want to try feeding him? She asked Asher. I pumped a bottle earlier. Asher's face lit up with an eagerness that was both heartbreaking and endearing. Over the past 2 weeks, he'd mastered the art of holding Noah, but feeding him was still a carefully supervised activity. Riley prepared the bottle and handed it to Asher, then helped him position Noah in his arms. The baby latched onto the bottle immediately, his tiny hands curling around Asher's fingers. He's getting stronger, Asher observed, wonder in his voice. Look at how he grips my finger. Dr. Martinez says that's a good sign. His reflexes are developing right on schedule. They fell into the peaceful rhythm of watching Noah eat, both parents marveling at the simple miracle of their child thriving. Riley found herself studying Asher's profile as he focused on Noah, noting the way his entire demeanor softened when he held their son. Can I ask you something? Riley said suddenly. Anything. What changed? I mean, what made you want to be here? To learn all this. 2 weeks ago you looked terrified to even touch him. Asher was quiet for so long that Riley wondered if he'd heard her. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. That first night after I saw you at the hospital, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the moments I'd already missed. The first time he opened his eyes, his first cry, the way you must have felt when you held him for the first time. And I realized that if I kept making the same choices I'd always made, I was going to miss everything that actually mattered. He looked up at her then, and Riley saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Complete vulnerability. I don't want to be my father, Riley. I don't want Noah to grow up wondering if his dad actually loves him, or if he's just another responsibility to be managed. I want to be present for this, for him, even if I'm terrible at it. Riley felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. You're not terrible at it. I'm learning, Asher said simply, and I'm trying to be patient with myself, the way you're being patient with me. Noah finished his bottle and immediately began fussing, arching his back in the way that meant he needed to be burped. Without hesitation, Asher lifted him to his shoulder and began the gentle patting motion Riley had taught him, swaying slightly as he hummed under his breath. The sound stopped Riley cold. It was barely audible, more of a vibration than actual music, but she recognized the melody. It was the same lullaby her grandfather used to hum when she was upset as a child, the one Evelyn had hummed during Riley's difficult nights of pregnancy. "Where did you learn that song?" she asked softly. Asher looked confused for a moment, then seemed to realize what he'd been doing. I don't know. I just started humming it. Did I do something wrong?" "No," Riley said quickly, her voice thick with emotion. "No, you did something very right." And as she watched her ex-husband, the man who'd once claimed he didn't have a paternal bone in his body, gentle their fussing son to sleep with a lullaby he somehow knew by instinct, Riley felt another piece of the wall around her heart quietly crumble away. The knock on the door came at 7 in the evening, hours after Asher's usual visiting time. Riley peered through the window and saw a woman she didn't recognize. Tall, blonde, impeccably dressed in a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than Riley's car. The stranger stood with the kind of perfect posture that suggested expensive private schools and cotillion classes. Riley opened the door cautiously, Noah sleeping peacefully in her arms. "Can I help you?" "You must be Riley," the woman said with a smile that didn't quite reach her crystal blue eyes. "I'm Vivian Ashford. I believe you know my fiancé." The words hit Riley like a physical blow. Fiancé. The woman was beautiful in the way that graced magazine covers. Angular cheekbones, flawless skin, the kind of effortless elegance that money could enhance but not buy. She looked exactly like the type of woman Asher had dated before Riley, the type Riley had always felt insecure around. "I'm sorry," Riley managed. "I think there's been some mistake. I don't know anyone named Asher Wallace," Vivian interrupted gently. "He's been spending quite a bit of time here lately, hasn't he?" The world tilted sideways. Riley gripped the doorframe tighter, using it to keep herself upright as her mind raced to process what she was hearing. Asher was engaged. He'd been coming here every day for 3 weeks, learning to feed Noah, holding their son like he was the most precious thing in the world. And he was engaged to another woman. "I can see this is news to you," Vivian continued, her voice soft with what might have been sympathy or triumph. "May I come in? I think we should talk." Riley stepped aside numbly, her protective instincts telling her to slam the door, but her shock making her movements automatic. Vivian entered the cozy living room and looked around with the kind of polite interest that wealthy people showed when visiting quaint places they'd never want to live in. "Charming," she said, settling gracefully onto Evelyn's floral sofa. "Very homey." Riley remained standing, swaying slightly to keep Noah calm. "When?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "When what, dear? When did he propose?" Vivian's smile sharpened slightly. 6 weeks ago, at the charity gala for children's literacy. You know how passionate Asher is about education initiatives. He'd been planning it for months. My father was so pleased. Our families have been friends for decades. 6 weeks ago. That was 3 weeks after Noah was born. 3 weeks before Asher had started coming to Millbrook. He'd been planning a proposal while she was struggling through sleepless nights with their newborn son. While she was wondering if she'd made a mistake by not telling him about the pregnancy. "Does he know you're here?" Riley asked. "Oh no." Vivian laughed, a sound like crystal bells that made Riley's teeth ache. "He's been so distracted lately, missing meetings, canceling dinners. I was worried something was wrong, so I hired a private investigator." She gestured toward Noah. "Imagine my surprise." Riley felt sick. The idea of being watched, investigated, reduced to a problem to be solved by someone she'd never met was nauseating. "What do you want?" "I want what's best for everyone involved," Vivian said smoothly. "Asher is going through a phase. Guilt over your divorce, curiosity about fatherhood. It's understandable, really. But surely you can see that this situation isn't sustainable." "What situation?" "Come now, Riley. You're an intelligent woman. Do you really think Asher is going to choose playing house in this little town over his real life? Over the woman he proposed to?" Vivian's voice remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath the silk. "He's a billionaire, darling. His world is board meetings and charity galas, not midnight feedings and diaper changes." Each word was a carefully aimed dart, hitting insecurities Riley had been trying to ignore. She'd been wondering the same things herself. How long Asher's interest in fatherhood would last, whether he was here out of genuine love or guilt-driven obligation. "He has a right to know his son," Riley said. lifting her chin with defiance she didn't feel. Of course he does, and I'm not suggesting otherwise. Vivian reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. I've spoken with an excellent family law attorney. He can help you set up a very generous custody arrangement, supervised visits, financial support that will ensure this little one has everything he needs. You'll never have to worry about money again. Supervised visits? Riley repeated, her voice rising slightly. Noah stirred at the sound, and she immediately lowered it. He's Noah's father, not some dangerous stranger. Is he, though? Vivian's eyebrows rose delicately. Really, Riley, what do you know about Asher as a father? You were married to the businessman, the CEO. This domestic version you've been seeing, do you honestly think it's sustainable? What happens when the novelty wears off and he remembers who he really is? The questions hit too close to Riley's own fears. She'd seen glimpses of the old Asher, the way he'd immediately reached for his phone when Marcus called about work crises, the exhaustion in his eyes when business demands conflicted with his visiting schedule. Was this new, attentive version of him real? Or was Vivian right about it being a phase? The attorney I mentioned specializes in high-profile cases. Vivian continued, pressing her advantage. He understands the need for discretion. We could arrange something that protects everyone's privacy. Yours, mine, and most importantly, the child's. His name is Noah, Riley said sharply. Of course, Noah. Vivian's smile never wavered. Such a sweet name. Biblical, isn't it? Very appropriate for a child who's going to need all the guidance he can get. Growing up without his father's daily presence, the manipulation was so smooth, so expertly delivered, that Riley almost missed it. Almost. But the implication was clear. Agree to supervised visits or watch Noah grow up knowing his father chose another woman over being a real parent. I think you should leave, Riley said, her voice steady, despite the turmoil in her chest. Vivian stood gracefully, smoothing her coat. I understand this is a lot to process. Take some time to think about what I've said. But Riley? She paused at the door, her expression suddenly serious. Don't mistake Asher's current infatuation with fatherhood for a permanent change. I've known him for 15 years. He always comes back to what he knows, to where he belongs. And that's with me. After Vivian left, Riley sank onto the sofa, still holding Noah, her mind reeling. Engaged. Asher was engaged to a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a society magazine. A woman who could offer him the kind of life Riley never could. Sophisticated, connected, uncomplicated by crying babies and sleep deprivation. She thought about the past 3 weeks, about the way Asher had looked at Noah with such wonder, the way he'd hummed that lullaby without even realizing it. Had it all been an act? A temporary fascination that would fade once the reality of single parenthood set in? Her phone buzzed with a text from Asher. Sorry I'm late tonight. Crisis at the office running longer than expected. See you tomorrow morning? Riley stared at the message, Vivian's words echoing in her mind. He always comes back to what he knows, to where he belongs. She typed back, we need to talk. Can you come by tonight when you're finished? The response came immediately. Of course. Is everything okay? Is Noah okay? Riley looked down at their son who was sleeping peacefully despite the chaos swirling around him. Noah's fine, but we need to discuss some things. I'll be there as soon as I can. Riley set the phone aside and closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. In a few hours, she would have to confront Asher about his engagement, about the future they'd been building that apparently had an expiration date she hadn't known about. She thought about Vivian's offer, financial security, legal protection, a clear arrangement that would let everyone move on with their lives. It was practical, sensible, the kind of solution that protected everyone involved. But as Noah made a soft sound in his sleep and curled his tiny fingers around hers, Riley realized that sometimes the sensible choice and the right choice weren't the same thing, and she had no idea which one she was supposed to make. Asher arrived at 10:30 at night, looking more disheveled than Riley had ever seen him. His tie was loosened, his shirt wrinkled from hours of stress, and his usually perfect hair fell across his forehead in dark waves. He carried a small gift bag in one hand and exhaustion in every line of his body. I'm sorry I'm so late, he said as Riley opened the door. The situation with the client got completely out of hand, and then Marcus discovered. He stopped mid-sentence, finally noticing Riley's expression. What's wrong? Riley stepped aside to let him in, her movements mechanical. She'd spent the last 3 hours rehearsing this conversation, but now that the moment was here, all her carefully planned words seemed to evaporate. Is Noah okay? Asher asked immediately, his eyes searching the quiet living room.
Right to the dome.
He's fine. He's sleeping upstairs with Grandma Evelyn. Riley's voice was steadier than she felt. Asher, we need to talk. Something in her tone made him set down the gift bag and give her his full attention. The man who commanded billion-dollar board meetings suddenly looked vulnerable, as if he was bracing for a blow he could sense coming but couldn't identify. Okay, he said carefully. What about? Vivian Ashford stopped by tonight. The color drained from Asher's face so quickly that Riley thought he might actually faint. He sank onto the sofa without being invited, his hands falling between his knees as he stared at the floor.
Do you have two stacks of shockwaves,
he
or do you
whispered,
have one stack?
then immediately looked up with stricken eyes. Sorry, I didn't mean to. So it's
If you
true.
have two stacks,
Riley
then
remained
definitely
standing,
still
her
share.
arms crossed protectively over her chest. You're engaged. Asher's silence was answer enough. Riley felt something cold and final settle in her stomach, even though she'd been expecting this confirmation since Vivian's visit.
I now have a
When?
full
She
stack
asked.
also.
6 weeks
If
ago.
anyone
His
needs some
voice was
shots, I
barely
now have a full
audible.
stack also.
Riley, I can explain. 6 weeks ago. Riley's laugh was
And
sharp and
there's
bitter.
some right here.
3 weeks after Noah was born, while I was here learning how to be a mother, wondering if I'd made the
it's
right
feast or
choice
famine,
by
I
not telling you about the
swear.
pregnancy, you were planning to propose to another woman.
You
It wasn't
found the
like
feast,
that.
the rest of us
Then
found
what
the
was it
famine.
like, Asher? Riley's composure finally cracked, her voice rising with 3 weeks' worth of suppressed
have
emotion.
4 bunks right
Because
now,
from where I'm
so-
sitting, it looks like you moved on pretty quickly from our marriage.
you find
Found yourself a nice, uncomplicated replacement who
feast, but how
won't
do you
burden
find
you
the
with
famine?
midnight feedings and stretch marks. Asher flinched as if she'd slapped him. Vivian isn't a
Bunks
replacement
there.
for you. She's what I thought I was supposed to want. And what am I? What is Noah? Some kind of midlife crisis? No. Asher stood up abruptly, running both hands through his hair. God, no. Riley, you and Noah you're everything I didn't know I needed. These past 3 weeks have been the best of my life, but not good enough to call off your engagement. The accusation hung between them like a challenge. Asher's jaw worked silently for a moment before he spoke.
view to like-
I tried,
So they're shooting
he
this
said
way?
quietly. 3 times. Every time I went to her apartment to end it, I lost my nerve. Her father and mine have been planning this merger for years. The engagement isn't just personal, it's business. If I break it off, it could destroy relationships that took decades to build. So you chose business over us. Again, Riley's voice was flat,
I feel like that would really
emotionless,
stop third
just like
parties
you
from
always
being
do.
nerfed.
I
Yeah.
chose cowardice,
Like, if you can't
Asher
hear it-
corrected, his voice raw with
it's over
self-loathing.
here.
I
Yeah, I
chose
can't
the
hear
easy
anything,
path
but I can
because I
see
was
it.
terrified of hurting people, of disappointing my father, of admitting that I'd rather change diapers in Millbrook than attend another charity gala in Manhattan. Riley studied his face, looking for signs of deception and finding only exhaustion and guilt. She offered me a deal tonight. Supervised visits, financial support, legal custody arrangements that would let everyone move on with their lives.
Those are real people?
Asher's head snapped up. What did you tell her?
There's gonna be 3 more
I
up here?
told her to leave. Riley moved to the window, staring out at the dark street. But maybe she's right. Maybe this whole thing is unsustainable. Maybe you'll get tired of playing house and remember who you really are. This is
I'm gonna
who I
try to
really am, Asher
up
said
here.
fiercely. The man who holds Noah while he sleeps because I can't bear to put him down. The man who canceled a meeting with the Japanese investors because it conflicted with his feeding time. The man who bought 17
they took
different
the
types
car.
of baby bottles because I wanted to make sure he had the best of everything. Riley turned to face him. Then why haven't you ended your engagement? The question hit its mark.
I did get the
Asher
finish
opened his mouth,
on-
then closed it, clearly
guy,
struggling
yeah.
for an answer that wouldn't sound like an excuse. Because I'm a coward, he said finally. Because ending it means admitting that everything I thought I wanted was wrong. It means disappointing
And I
people I
only saw
care
2.
about,
There was
potentially
only 2.
destroying business relationships
there
that
wasn't
affect
anybody on
hundreds
top
of
of the car.
employees. It means choosing love
Yeah, so
over
they might be down
logic.
to 2 now, but
And I've never
they're
been good
gone,
at that.
gone.
And what about disappointing me? What about disappointing your son? I know, Asher whispered.
And
I know I'm hurting you and I hate myself for it. I need more time to figure out how to
over
untangle
here.
everything without destroying people's lives. Riley laughed, but there was no humor in it. Time. Always more time. Do you know what Vivian said to me tonight? She said you always come back to what you know, to where you belong. And maybe she's right.
Yeah, that was
She's
the last
not,
one of the bot team
isn't she?
of that sort of
Riley's
house.
eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Because right now it looks like you belong with a woman who can offer you the kind of life you're used to. Clean, sophisticated, uncomplicated, not messy and exhausting like this. Asher crossed the room in 3 quick strides,
Do you want
stopping
her to
just
get to
short
high
of touching
ground,
her.
maybe?
Riley, please, don't do this. Don't give up on us. There is no us, Asher. There's you, and there's me, and there's Noah. But there's no us because you're engaged to someone else. I'll end it, he said desperately. Tomorrow. I'll call off the engagement tomorrow. No. Riley's voice was quiet but firm. Not because I'm asking you to. Not because you feel guilty. If you end it, it has to be because you genuinely want to choose this life over that one. Because you want to be Noah's father more than you want to be Vivian's husband. I do want that. Then prove it. Riley moved past him toward the stairs. But until you do, I think you should stop coming here. I can't keep pretending that we're building something real when you're planning a wedding with another woman. Asher grabbed her wrist gently as she passed. Riley, wait. Please don't shut me out. Whatever happens between us, Noah is my son. I want to be part of his life. Riley looked down at his hand on her wrist, then up at his face. Noah deserves a father who chooses him, not one who treats him like a consolation prize. Figure out what you really want, Asher. Then call me. She pulled her wrist free and headed upstairs, leaving Asher standing alone in the living room. Behind her, she heard him pick up the gift bag he'd brought. Something else for Noah, no doubt. Another expensive gesture that couldn't make up for the deeper problems between them. The front door closed with a soft click, and Riley finally allowed herself to cry. Silent tears that she muffled against her hand so she wouldn't wake Noah or her grandmother. Tears for the man she'd thought Asher was becoming, for the family she'd started to believe they could build, for the choice he'd have to make that might destroy everything she'd begun to hope for. Outside, Asher sat in his car for a long time, staring at the house where his son slept peacefully, unaware that his father was about to make the most important decision of his life. The gift bag sat on the passenger seat, a stuffed elephant that played lullabies, something he'd seen in a store window and bought on impulse because it reminded him of the song he'd hummed to Noah. Such a small thing, but everything important in his life had turned out to be small things. Noah's tiny fingers wrapped around his, Riley's smile when he'd successfully burped the baby, the way his heart had stopped when he'd first heard their son's cry. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to Vivian's contact information. His finger hovered over her name for a moment before he closed the phone and started the engine. Tomorrow. He would deal with everything tomorrow. Tonight, he just wanted to drive through the quiet streets and remember what it felt like to believe he could be the man Riley and Noah deserved. 5 days passed without a word from Asher, and Riley felt each hour like a physical ache. She told herself it was for the best, that his silence proved Vivian had been right about where his priorities lay. But every time Noah made the soft, cooing sounds that reminded her of his father's voice, every time she caught herself listening for the sound of expensive tires in the driveway, she felt the loss like a fresh wound. Grandma Evelyn, bless her heart, said nothing about the sudden absence of their daily visitor. But Riley caught her glancing at the driveway more often than usual and keeping the good coffee warm longer than necessary each morning. On the sixth day, Riley's phone rang at 7 a.m. Marcus Chen's name appeared on the screen, and her heart immediately jumped to the worst conclusions. Car accident, heart attack, something terrible had happened to Asher, and Marcus was calling to tell her. Riley, Marcus's voice was tense, urgent. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. What's wrong? Is Asher's fine, physically anyway, but he's about to do something that could destroy everything he's built, and I need to know if it's worth it. Riley sank onto the kitchen stool, Noah sleeping peacefully in his bouncer nearby. I don't understand. He's calling off the engagement. Today, in about 2 hours actually. He's meeting with Vivian and both sets of parents to end it publicly. Marcus paused and Riley could hear traffic in the background, as if he was driving somewhere in a hurry. Riley, this isn't just about breaking up with his fiancée. Richard Wallace has been planning this merger for 5 years. Vivian's father controls 3 of our biggest overseas contracts. If Asher humiliates them like this, it could cost us everything. Riley's mouth went dry. Why are you telling me this? Because he won't listen to reason, won't take my calls, won't respond to emails. The only thing he's talked about for the past 6 days is you and Noah, and how he can't live with himself for choosing fear over love. Marcus's voice grew rougher. Look, I've known Asher for 15 years. I've never seen him like this, completely willing to sacrifice everything for something he wants. The question is, are you worth it? The question hit Riley like a slap. Excuse me? That came out wrong. I'm sorry. What I mean is, If he does this, if he burns all these bridges for you and Noah, will you be there for him? Because if you're not, if this is just going to be another failed relationship that cost him his entire business empire, then I need to stop him. Riley felt anger rise in her chest. I never asked him to do this. I told him to figure out what he wanted and call me. I didn't tell him to destroy his life, but you want him to choose you. The truth of it made her close her eyes. I want him to choose his son. I want Noah to have a father who puts him first, not someone who treats fatherhood like a hobby that fits around his real priorities. And if that choice costs him everything else? Riley looked at Noah, who was starting to stir in his bouncer, his tiny face scrunching up in the way that meant he'd be hungry soon. Then we'll figure it out together. That's what families do. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Okay, he said finally. Okay, that's what I needed to know. Marcus, wait. But he'd already hung up. Riley stared at her phone, her mind racing with implications she hadn't considered. She'd been so focused on whether Asher would choose them that she hadn't thought about what that choice might cost him. The Asher she'd married had built his entire identity around his business success. If he lost that, would he resent her and Noah for it? Would choosing love over logic destroy the very qualities that had made her fall in love with him in the first place? Before she could spiral further into doubt, her phone rang again. This time it was Asher. I'm coming to see you, he said without preamble. We need to talk. Asher, Marcus called. I know. I figured he would. Asher's voice was different somehow. Steadier, more resolute than she'd heard it in weeks. I'm ending the engagement today, Riley. I should have done it the moment I saw you and Noah at the hospital. You don't have to do this because I asked you to. I'm not doing it because you asked. I'm doing it because I finally figured out who I want to be. The sound of a car door slamming came through the phone. I'm in your driveway. Can I come in? Riley looked down at herself. Yoga pants, one of her grandfather's old flannel shirts, hair in a messy ponytail that hadn't been brushed in 2 days. She looked like exactly what she was, a new mother who was too tired to care about appearances. I'll be right there, she said. Asher looked different when she opened the door. Still handsome. Still impeccably dressed in a navy suit that probably cost more than her car, but there was something new in his posture, a kind of calm determination that she'd never seen before.
No need to go through
How's Noah?
tickets.
He asked, following her into the living room.
Any of that stuff.
He's good, sleeping longer stretches at
you do a
night, starting to
command.
track
I guess I could
objects with
show
his
the
eyes.
deal, and we could
Riley
do the
settled beside the bouncer
also.
where Noah was awake and looking
But I was
around
just
with the
gonna do
unfocused
the-
attention of a 6-week-old. How are you? Terrified,
Back to dashboard.
Asher said
Okay,
honestly,
okay, that's why.
and more
I was in
certain
the
than
wrong
I've
thing.
ever been about anything in my life. He knelt beside Noah's bouncer, his expression softening as their son's
was
gaze
under
seemed to find his
chat
face.
box.
Hey, buddy. I'm sorry I was away for a few days. I had some things to figure out. Noah made a small sound that might have been recognition, and Asher's smile was radiant. Riley, he said, still looking at Noah, I need you to know something. I'm not ending my engagement because you asked me to. I'm ending it because every morning for the past 6 days, I've woken up thinking about you and Noah, and every night I've gone to sleep angry at myself for choosing the easy path over the right one. The right one might not be easy, Riley said quietly. Marcus told me about the business implications. Asher finally looked up at her. Are you trying to talk me out of this? I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're choosing. Your whole life has been built around your company, your success. If you lose that, I won't lose it. Asher interrupted. It might change. We might lose some contracts. But Marcus and I built that company from nothing once. We can do it again if we have to. He stood and moved to sit beside her on the sofa. But even if we couldn't, even if choosing you and Noah meant starting over completely, I'd still make the same choice. How can you be so sure? Asher was quiet for a moment, watching Noah's tiny chest rise and fall with each breath, because for the first time in my life I know what home feels like. It's not my penthouse or my office or some 5-star hotel in Tokyo. It's wherever you and Noah are. Riley felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Asher, I know I hurt you, I know I was a coward, and I know trust isn't something I can just ask for and expect to receive. But Riley, I love you. I love our son. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of being your partner and his father. The words hung between them, simple and devastating in their honesty. Riley looked at this man who'd been willing to risk everything for the chance to change Noah's diapers and help with 3 a.m. feedings, and felt something shift inside her chest. What happens now? She asked. Now I go break my engagement, probably get screamed at by 4 different people, and most likely lose several $1 million in contracts. Asher's smile was wry but genuine. Then I come back here and ask if you'll let me take Noah for his first walk around the neighborhood. Just Noah? Well, Asher said, reaching for her hand. I was hoping his mother might come too, if she's not too tired of dealing with men who take too long to figure out what's important. Riley looked down at their joined hands, at the calluses Asher had developed from learning to be a father, at the simple gold band he still wore on his right hand, the wedding ring he'd never quite been able to remove after their divorce. I might be willing to give you another chance, she said softly, but this time we do things differently. No more choosing work over family. No more making decisions about Noah without including me. Done, Asher said immediately. And no more secrets. If something's wrong, if you're having doubts, if your father disapproves, we talk about it. Together. Done. Riley studied his face, looking for any sign of hesitation and finding none. Okay, she said finally. Go end your engagement. But Asher, come back. Noah and I will be waiting. Asher lifted their joined hands and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles. I'll always come back, he promised. This is where I belong. And as he left to face the most difficult conversation of his life, Riley believed him, not because his words were perfect, but because for the first time since she'd known him, his actions matched his promises. He was choosing them, choosing love, choosing the messy, complicated, beautiful reality of being a family. Noah made a small sound from his bouncer, as if he sensed the shift in the world around him. Riley picked him up and settled him against her shoulder, swaying gently as she watched Asher's car disappear down the street. Your daddy's coming back, she whispered into Noah's soft hair. And this time he's staying. The silence in the conference room at Wallace Industries was deafening. Asher sat at the head of the mahogany table that had witnessed countless business deals, facing four of the most influential people in his life, all of whom looked like they wanted to strangle him with their bare hands. Richard Wallace, his father, sat with the rigid posture of a man who'd built an empire through sheer force of will and wasn't accustomed to having his plans disrupted. Beside him, Harrison Ashford looked equally thunderous, his normally genial face dark with anger and humiliation. Vivian sat between her father and her mother, Patricia Ashford, her perfectly composed mask finally cracking to reveal hurt and fury in equal measure. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Richard said, his voice dangerously quiet. You're calling off your engagement to marry your ex-wife who kept your child's existence secret for months, potentially destroying a merger 5 years in the making. I'm calling off my engagement because I don't love Vivian, Asher replied calmly. And I'm not marrying anyone. Riley and I are divorced, and that's not changing anytime soon. This is about being a father to my son. A son you knew nothing about until 6 weeks ago, Patricia Ashford interjected coldly. How convenient that his mother suddenly appears with a baby just as your engagement is announced. Asher's jaw tightened. Riley didn't suddenly appear. I ran into her by accident, and she had no idea I was engaged when I found out about Noah. So you claim, Harrison said, but surely you can see how this looks from the outside. A gold digger with perfect timing. A bastard child to complicate inheritance issues. Stop. Asher's voice cut through the room like a blade. I won't sit here and listen to you insult the mother of my child. Riley has never asked me for a single dollar. She's been raising Noah alone for 6 weeks, working freelance jobs to pay for his care, living with her grandmother because she couldn't afford her own place after our divorce settlement. Then give her more money and walk away, Richard said bluntly. Set up a trust for the child. Arrange for supervised visits if you must, but don't torpedo your entire future for a moment of misguided guilt. Asher looked at his father, the man who'd taught him that success was measured in quarterly profits, that personal happiness was secondary to business achievement. For 36 years, he'd tried to live up to Richard Wallace's expectations, and for 36 years, he'd felt like he was suffocating. It's not guilt, Asher said quietly. It's love. Something you might not understand given that you missed most of my childhood building this company. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Richard's face flushed with anger. But before he could respond, Vivian spoke for the first time since the meeting had begun. I knew, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, about the baby. I've known for 2 weeks. Everyone turned to stare at her. Harrison's face went pale with horror. Vivian, what are you talking about? I hired a private investigator when Asher started acting strangely. I found out about Riley and the baby, and she looked up at Asher with something that might have been regret. I went to see her. I offered her money to arrange supervised visits and stay out of your life. You did what? Asher stood so abruptly that his chair rolled backward into the wall. I was protecting our relationship, Vivian said defensively. I was protecting our future, but she turned me down, Asher. She chose poverty and uncertainty over financial security because she wanted you to choose them freely. The room erupted in furious voices, Harrison demanding to know why Vivian hadn't told him, Patricia scandalized by the very idea of bribing the mother of a grandchild, Richard calculating the legal implications of attempted manipulation. But Asher heard none of it. Riley had been offered an easy way out, money, security, a clean break that would have let him stay engaged without the messy complications of fatherhood. And she'd said no. She'd chosen the harder path because she wanted him to make a real choice, not a forced one. The meeting is over, Asher said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Asher, sit down, Richard commanded. We need to discuss damage control. No, we don't. My personal life isn't a business problem to be solved. Asher moved toward the door, then paused to look back at Vivian. I'm sorry this didn't work out the way you planned. You deserve someone who chooses you first, always. That person isn't me. He left them arguing among themselves and took the elevator down to the parking garage. His hands were shaking as he started his car, adrenaline and relief coursing through him in equal measures. He'd done it. He'd actually done it. His phone buzzed with text messages. Marcus wanting updates, his assistant asking about rescheduled meetings, his father demanding he return to finish their conversation. Asher ignored them all and drove toward Millbrook, toward the small house where his real life was waiting. Riley was in the front yard when he arrived, hanging Noah's tiny clothes on a makeshift clothesline while the baby slept in a portable carrier beside her. She looked up as his car pulled into the driveway, and Asher could see the question in her eyes before she spoke. How did it go? She asked, walking toward him with cautious hope on her face. About as well as you'd expect when you tell four powerful people that their carefully laid plans don't matter to you anymore. Asher got out of the car and immediately moved to peek at Noah, who was sleeping peacefully despite the chaos his existence had caused. Vivian told me what she offered you, what she threatened you with. Riley's face tightened. I was going to tell you about that. You turned down guaranteed financial security for you and Noah because you wanted me to choose you freely. Asher reached out to touch her face gently. Do you have any idea how extraordinary that is? It's not extraordinary. It's what love looks like. Riley leaned into his touch. I wanted you to want us, not feel obligated to us. I do want you, both of you, more than I've ever wanted anything. Asher glanced toward the house. Is your grandmother home? Book club meeting, she won't be back for 2 hours. Riley studied his face. Why? Instead of answering, Asher moved to the carrier and carefully lifted Noah, who stirred but didn't wake. The baby settled against his chest like he belonged there, and Asher felt the familiar tightness in his throat that came every time he held his son. I have something to ask you, he said, and I want Noah to hear it even if he's too young to understand. Riley's eyebrows rose, but she followed him onto the front porch where they settled on the swing that overlooked Evelyn's garden. Asher adjusted his hold on Noah, then looked at Riley with an expression so serious it made her heart skip. I know we're divorced. I know we have a lot of history to work through, a lot of trust to rebuild. But Riley, these past 7 weeks have been the happiest of my life. Not because everything's been easy, God knows it hasn't, but because for the first time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Asher, let me finish, he said gently. I'm not asking you to marry me again. I'm not asking you to move in with me or make any big decisions about our future. I'm asking if you'll let me stay, here in Millbrook, where I can be Noah's father every day and try to earn my way back into your heart. Riley stared at him. Stay? Here? What about your company, your life in the city? Marcus can handle day-to-day operations. We've been talking about opening a satellite office anyway, something smaller, more focused on innovation than acquisition. I can work remotely most of the time, commute when necessary. Asher's voice grew softer. I don't want to miss any more of Noah's firsts. His first smile, his first word, his first steps. And I don't want to miss any more chances to prove to you that I've changed. The swing creaked gently as they rocked back and forth, Noah breathing peacefully between them. Riley looked out at the garden where she'd played as a child, at the street where she'd learned to ride a bike, at the life she'd built for herself and her son in the aftermath of heartbreak. It won't be easy, she said finally. Small-town life is different from what you're used to. People talk, everyone knows everyone's business. And Noah's going to be a handful as he gets older. I'm counting on it, Asher said with a smile. Besides, after today's meeting, I think I can handle small-town gossip. Riley looked at him. Really looked at him. The expensive suit, the confident posture. The man who'd just walked away from a billion-dollar merger because he'd rather read bedtime stories to a baby who couldn't even hold his head up yet. Okay, she said quietly. Okay, you can stay. We'll figure out the details as we go, but yes, you can stay. Asher's smile was radiant, transforming his entire face. Thank you, he whispered, leaning over to press a soft kiss to her temple. Thank you for giving me another chance. As if sensing the importance of the moment, Noah opened his eyes and looked up at both his parents with the unfocused attention of a newborn. Asher shifted him so Riley could see his face too, and they sat together on the porch swing, watching their son discover the world one blink at a time. He's going to be spoiled rotten, Riley said, noting the way Asher's entire attention focused on Noah's smallest movements. Probably, Asher agreed cheerfully, but loved. God, Riley, he's going to be so loved. And sitting there in the golden afternoon light, surrounded by the simple peace of a small town and the complicated joy of second chances, Riley finally allowed herself to believe that some endings were really just beginnings in disguise. 3 months had passed since Asher made the decision that changed everything, and Millbrook had slowly begun to feel like home. He'd rented a charming colonial house just 6 blocks from Evelyn's, close enough to be part of Noah's daily routine, but far enough to give Riley the space she needed to rebuild trust at her own pace. The transition hadn't been without its challenges. The first week, Asher had attempted to turn the spare bedroom into a state-of-the-art home office, complete with 3 monitors, a video conferencing system, and enough technology to run a small country. Riley had taken one look at it and burst into laughter. You're trying to recreate your Manhattan office in a house that was built in 1952, she'd said, gesturing at the room that now looked like a spaceship had crashed into a bed and breakfast. The neighbors are going to think I'm dating a mad scientist. Now his office was simpler. A single laptop on an antique desk he'd bought from the local furniture store, a comfortable chair that didn't look like it belonged on a corporate jet, and family photos instead of business awards on the walls. The change had surprised him by how much he liked it. This morning found Asher in Riley's kitchen at 6 a.m., attempting to make coffee while Noah dozed in his arms. At 11 weeks old, their son had developed distinct preferences. He liked being held while he slept. He preferred Riley's left shoulder to her right, and he had absolutely no patience for wet diapers. He'd also started smiling. Real, genuine smiles that made Asher's heart stop every single time. You're going to spoil him, Riley said softly, appearing in the doorway in her favorite burgundy robe, her auburn hair tumbling over her shoulders in waves. Good morning to you too, Asher replied, careful not to move too suddenly and wake Noah. And yes, probably. I've already ordered him a college fund and a library card. Riley padded barefoot across the kitchen and stood on her tiptoes to peer at Noah's sleeping face. A library card? He can't even hold his head up consistently. It's never too early to encourage a love of learning, Asher said solemnly, then grinned when Riley rolled her eyes. Plus, I may have gotten a little carried away at the bookstore yesterday. There's a box of board books on your front porch. How big of a box? Define big. Riley shook her head, but she was smiling. The kind of smile that had made Asher fall in love with her in the first place. Over the past 3 months, he'd been collecting these moments. Her laugh when he'd tried to assemble Noah's high chair and ended up with extra screws. Her soft humming while she folded tiny clothes. The way she looked at him when he successfully got Noah to stop crying. They'd been careful with each other, rebuilding their relationship from the ground up. No assumptions, no grand gestures, just quiet moments and honest conversations. Asher had learned that Riley liked her coffee with a ridiculous amount of cream, that she talked to Noah in a special voice when she thought no one was listening, and that she still wore the delicate gold bracelet he'd given her for their first anniversary. Riley had learned that Asher was genuinely happier in Millbrook than he'd ever been in Manhattan, that he'd started volunteering at the local literacy program, and that he sang old rock songs to Noah during diaper changes because they seemed to calm the baby down. Marcus called yesterday, Asher said, shifting Noah slightly so Riley could fix the coffee. The Singapore contract came through after all. Apparently Harrison Ashford's threats weren't as influential as he thought they'd be. How do you feel about that? Riley asked, measuring coffee with the precision of someone who'd perfected her morning routine during months of sleep deprivation. Relieved, mostly. It means I don't have to worry about laying people off. Asher paused, watching her move around the kitchen with easy familiarity. And vindicated, I suppose. It turns out choosing love over fear was good business after all. Riley glanced at him over her shoulder. You sound surprised. I am a little. I spent so many years believing that personal happiness and professional success were mutually exclusive. That if I wanted to build something lasting, I had to sacrifice everything else. And now? Now I think maybe the reason I was never truly successful was because I was trying to build everything on a foundation of fear and obligation, instead of joy and purpose. The coffee maker gurgled to life, filling the quiet kitchen with rich aromas. Noah stirred in Asher's arms, making the small sounds that meant he'd be hungry soon. Riley reached for him automatically, and Asher transferred their son to her arms with the practiced ease of parents who'd learned to work as a team. I have news too, Riley said, settling into the breakfast nook with Noah. Jennifer offered me a permanent position, lead graphic designer for her marketing firm, full-time, with benefits and everything. Asher felt a complicated mix of pride and concern. That's wonderful. How do you feel about it? Terrified, Riley admitted with a laugh. It's been almost a year since I worked full-time, and the idea of leaving Noah with a babysitter makes me want to hyperventilate. But it's also the first real opportunity I've had since the divorce to build something for myself. You don't have to take it if you're not ready, Asher said carefully. Financially, I mean. If you want to wait until Noah's older. I know, Riley interrupted gently. And I love that you'd support that choice, but I think I want to try. I miss using my brain for more than figuring out why Noah's crying, or whether that spot on his sleeper is spit up or something worse. Asher poured coffee for both of them, adding the frankly obscene amount of cream Riley preferred. What can I do to help? Well, I was hoping you might know something about babysitters, or nannies. Whatever the appropriate term is for someone who watches a 3-month-old while his mother has panic attacks about leaving him. I might know someone, Asher said with a smile. Mrs. Patterson from the church has been watching kids in this town for 40 years. She helped raise half the people our age, and she's been not so subtly hinting that she'd love to spend time with Noah. You've been researching babysitters? I've been preparing for every possible scenario that might make your life easier, Asher admitted. It's a habit. Riley looked at him for a long moment, something soft and wondering in her expression. You know, 3 months ago I would have seen that as you trying to control everything. Now I think I'm starting to recognize it as love. The simple statement hit Asher like a physical blow. He set down his coffee cup and crossed the kitchen to where she sat, kneeling beside her chair so they were eye level. Riley, he said quietly, I need you to know something. These past 3 months, building this life with you and Noah, have been the best of my entire existence. I wake up every morning grateful that you gave me this chance. Asher, I'm not asking for anything, he continued. I'm not pushing for more than you're ready to give. I just need you to know that I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens, however long it takes, I'm here. Riley reached out to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. I know, she whispered. I can see it in everything you do. The way you sing to him at 2 a.m, the way you learn to make his bottles exactly the right temperature, the way you look at both of us like we're some kind of miracle. You are, Asher said simply. Both of you. Noah chose that moment to make his presence known with a cry that announced his hunger to the entire neighborhood. Riley laughed and stood to prepare his bottle, but not before pressing a soft kiss to Asher's forehead. The first kiss she'd initiated since he'd moved to Millbrook. It was a small gesture, barely more than a brush of lips against skin, but it felt like a promise, like maybe eventually they might find their way back to each other completely. As Riley warmed Noah's bottle and Asher made mental notes about calling Mrs. Patterson, neither of them noticed the black sedan that had been parked across the street for the past hour, or the woman inside it watching their morning routine with calculating eyes. Vivian Ashford had come to Millbrook with a plan, and watching Asher's obvious happiness through the kitchen window, she was more determined than ever to see it through. Some mistakes, she'd decided, required correction, and some people needed to learn that walking away from a life of privilege came with consequences they hadn't considered. She started the engine and drove slowly past the house, noting the address, the layout, the obvious security weaknesses of a small town that had never needed to worry about the kind of problems that money and vindictiveness could create. Asher Wallace thought he'd chosen love over everything else. But Vivian was about to teach him that some choices came with a price that even love couldn't pay. The emergency call came at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night, just as Asher was finishing Noah's bedtime story. Riley's panicked voice cut through the peaceful evening like a blade. Asher, I need you to come over right now. Don't ask questions, just come. And bring your lawyer's number. He was out the door before she finished speaking, his heart hammering against his ribs as he drove the 6 blocks that had never seemed longer. Riley met him at the front door, her face pale and her hands shaking as she held a manila envelope. What happened? He asked, immediately checking her for injuries, then looking around for Noah. Where's the baby? He's fine. He's upstairs with Grandma Evelyn. But Asher? Riley's voice broke. She's trying to take him. Who's trying to take him? Instead of answering, Riley handed him the envelope. Inside was a legal document that made his blood run cold. A petition for emergency custody filed by Vivian Ashford, claiming that Noah was in immediate danger due to his parents' unstable living situation and history of poor judgment. Asher read through the document twice, his lawyer's training helping him parse the legal language that was designed to sound official and terrifying. This is bullshit, he said finally. Complete, legally baseless bullshit. No judge would grant emergency custody based on these allegations. Keep reading, Riley whispered. The attached photographs made Asher's stomach drop. Images of him entering and leaving Riley's house at all hours, carefully captioned to suggest he was living there unmarried. Photos of Riley at the grocery store looking exhausted, framed to make her appear unfit. Pictures of Noah's nursery that somehow made the cozy room look inadequate and unsafe. But the worst was the final page, a sworn affidavit from a concerned citizen claiming to have witnessed erratic behavior and signs of mental instability from both parents. The signature was illegible, but the message was clear. Someone had been watching them for weeks, documenting their lives, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. There's more, Riley said, pulling out a second document. A restraining order. She's claiming you're a threat to her safety because you aggressively ended your engagement and have been stalking her since then. Asher felt rage build in his chest, hot and consuming. I haven't seen or spoken to Vivian since the day I broke our engagement. I haven't even been to Manhattan in 6 weeks. I know that. You know that. But she has witnesses who will swear they saw you outside her apartment building, following her to restaurants, calling her at all hours. Riley's laugh was bitter and broken. She's thought of everything, Asher. Every angle, every possible attack. When is the hearing? Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. She filed for emergency status, claiming Noah was in imminent danger. Riley sank onto the sofa, her strength finally giving out. I called 3 lawyers tonight. None of them can take the case on such short notice, and the ones who could. Asher, they want retainers I can't afford. Asher knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. Riley, look at me. This isn't going to work. Vivian might have money and connections, but she doesn't have the truth, and she doesn't have me. What if she does have connections that matter? What if the judge believes her witnesses? What if... Then we fight, Asher said fiercely. We fight with everything we have, and we win because Noah belongs with us. With you. Riley's eyes filled with tears. I'm so scared, Asher. What if I lose him? What if they decide I'm an unfit mother because I'm divorced and struggling financially and... Stop. Asher moved to sit beside her, pulling her against his chest. You are the best mother Noah could possibly have. You've sacrificed everything for him, loved him with your whole heart, given him a safe and happy home. No judge with any sense would take a child away from a mother like you. But what if money matters more than love? What if Vivian can provide things I can't, and the court decides that's more important than... She was cut off by the sound of footsteps on the stairs. Evelyn appeared with Noah in her arms, the baby fussing softly in the way that meant he sensed the tension around him. He's asking for his mama, Evelyn said gently, settling Noah into Riley's arms. The baby immediately calmed, curling against his mother's chest like he belonged nowhere else in the world. Asher watched them together, Riley's protective curve around their son, Noah's complete trust in his mother's embrace, and felt something crystallize in his chest. This was his family. These were the people he would fight for, die for, move mountains for if necessary. I have an idea, he said quietly, but you might not like it. Riley looked up at him, hope and fear warring in her expression. Tell me, we get married tonight now. Asher's voice was steady, certain. Not because we're being forced to, not because of external pressure, but because I love you and Noah more than anything else in this world, and I want the legal right to protect both of you. Riley stared at him. Asher, that's not... We can't just... Yes, we can. Judge Morrison lives 2 blocks away, and he's authorized to perform emergency civil ceremonies. Marcus is already on his way with the marriage license application. I called him from the car. Asher reached out to touch Noah's tiny hand. Riley, I know this isn't the proposal you dreamed of, and I know the timing is terrible, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. You want to marry me to help me keep custody of Noah? I want to marry you because you're the love of my life and he's our son, and we're stronger together than apart. Asher's voice was rough with emotion. The custody thing is just a bonus. A married couple with stable finances and a loving home is much harder to attack than a single mother struggling to make ends meet. Riley looked down at Noah, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder, completely trusting that his parents would keep him safe. What if this doesn't work? What if we get married and she still finds a way to? Then at least we'll face it together. As a family, legally, officially, completely. Asher stood and held out his hand. Riley Moore, will you marry me? Not because you have to, not because it's convenient, but because you love me and want to build a life with me. The simple question hung in the air between them, weighted with months of careful rebuilding, years of history, and a future that suddenly seemed both terrifying and beautiful. Riley looked at the man who'd given up $1 billion merger to read bedtime stories to their son, who'd learned to change diapers and warm bottles at 3 a.m., who'd moved to a small town and completely rebuilt his life because he wanted to be present for the moments that mattered. Yes, she whispered, then louder with growing certainty. Yes, I'll marry you. Asher's smile was radiant as he helped her to her feet, careful not to wake Noah. Evelyn, would you mind being our witness? I thought you'd never ask, the older woman said with tears in her eyes. Let me get my good dress. 2 hours later, they stood in Judge Morrison's living room, Noah sleeping peacefully in Riley's arms, while she and Asher exchanged simple vows that felt more profound than any cathedral ceremony could have been. Marcus served as best man via video call from Manhattan, and Evelyn cried through the entire 5-minute ceremony. When Judge Morrison pronounced them husband and wife, Asher kissed Riley softly, carefully, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. It wasn't passionate or dramatic. It was tender and certain, and full of promises for the future they were choosing to build together. I love you, Riley whispered against his lips. I love you, and I'm terrified, and I'm so grateful you're here. I love you too, Asher replied. All of you. Always. The next morning they walked into the courthouse as a united front, Mr. and Mrs. Wallace presenting themselves to the world as what they'd always been in their hearts, a family. Vivian's carefully constructed case suddenly looked less impressive when faced with two parents who'd chosen each other freely, who could document months of stable, loving care for their son. The emergency custody hearing lasted less than an hour. Faced with a legally married couple, solid financial records, and a healthy, well-cared-for baby, Vivian's petition crumbled under the weight of its own absurdity. As they walked out of the courthouse with Noah still safely in their custody, Riley felt Asher take her hand. Not her ex-husband's hand, not her co-parent's hand, but her husband's hand. Warm and steady and completely committed to the life they were building together. So, she said, looking up at the man she'd married twice now, what do we do for our honeymoon? Asher grinned and adjusted Noah's carrier on his chest. I was thinking we could go home and teach our son how to say daddy. I hear 3-month-olds are very advanced these days. Riley laughed, the sound bright and joyful and completely free. I love you, Asher Wallace. I love you too, Riley Wallace. Both of you. Forever. And walking toward their car under the bright morning sun, with their son babbling contentedly between them, they looked exactly like what they were. A family that had fought for each other and won. 2 years later, the sound of toddler laughter echoed through the backyard of their Millbrook home, as Noah chased soap bubbles with the determined concentration of a 2-year-old who'd just discovered the magic of running. His dark hair caught the afternoon sunlight, and his blue eyes, so much like his father's, sparkled with pure joy as he clapped his hands together, trying to catch the iridescent spheres. "Daddy, more!" he called out, his vocabulary having exploded over the past few months to include approximately 50 words, half of which were demands for his father's attention. Asher, sitting cross-legged on a blanket with the bubble solution, grinned and blew another stream of bubbles into the warm spring air. "More bubbles for the bubble monster," he declared, making Noah shriek with delight. Riley watched from the kitchen window, her hands automatically resting on the gentle curve of her belly where their daughter was growing, due to arrive in just 3 months. At 32, she felt more settled and happy than she'd ever imagined possible. Her graphic design business had flourished, with clients across New England seeking out her work. Asher's satellite office had exceeded all expectations, And they bought this house, a sprawling 1920s colonial with a wraparound porch and enough bedrooms for the family they were building. More! More! Noah's voice grew more insistent, and Riley smiled as she watched Asher comply immediately, unable to deny their son anything that brought him joy. The past 2 years had been a masterclass in partnership. They'd learned to navigate the challenges of marriage, parenthood, and blending their previously separate lives into something stronger than either had been alone. There had been difficult moments, sleepless nights when Noah was teething, disagreements about discipline and schedules, the normal friction of two strong-willed people learning to build a life together. But there had been so much more joy than struggle. Noah's first word had been Dada, making Asher cry actual tears. His first steps had been between his parents, Riley on one side of the living room and Asher on the other, both of them cheering like Noah had just won an Olympic medal. His first, "I love you," had been whispered to Riley during a bedtime story, and she'd had to call Asher into the room so Noah could repeat it for his father. "Mrs. Wallace?" The voice behind her made Riley turn. Their new nanny, Catherine Patterson, Mrs. Patterson's daughter who'd recently moved back to Millbrook, stood in the doorway holding a small wrapped package. "This just arrived for you. Special delivery." Riley wiped her hands on her apron and accepted the package, frowning at the elegant handwriting on the cream-colored envelope attached to the top. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of expensive stationery, with just a few lines written in the same precise script. "Congratulations on your pregnancy. Some mistakes have a way of working out for the best. I hope you found the happiness you were looking for." Riley stared at the note for a long moment, then opened the package to find a beautiful silver picture frame with an intricate engraving. "Family is not an important thing, it's everything." The note inside explained that it was a wedding gift, 2 years late but sincerely meant. "Everything okay?" Asher's voice came from behind her. He'd come inside carrying Noah, both of them covered in grass stains and grinning. "Mama!" Noah reached for Riley, and she took him gratefully, inhaling his little boy scent of sunshine and soap bubbles. "It's from Vivian," Riley said, showing Asher the note and gift. "An apology, I think. Or maybe an acknowledgement that things worked out the way they were supposed to." Asher read the note over her shoulder, his arms coming around both her and Noah. "How do you feel about that?" Riley considered the question, surprised to discover that she felt nothing but a mild curiosity about the woman who'd once tried to destroy their family. "I feel grateful," she said finally. Not to her necessarily, but grateful that her attempts to tear us apart only made us stronger. "Mama, baby sister?" Noah asked, patting Riley's belly with the gentle touch they'd been teaching him. "Yes, sweetheart. Baby sister is growing in there." Riley smiled as Noah leaned down to press a wet kiss to her stomach, something he'd started doing after they'd explained that his little sister was waiting to meet him. "I love baby sister," Noah declared solemnly. "She loves you too," Asher said, ruffling Noah's hair. "She's very lucky to have such a good big brother." The afternoon stretched ahead of them, lazy and perfect and ordinary in the way that Riley had learned to treasure. Tomorrow, Asher would drive into the city for meetings, and she'd work from her home studio while Noah played nearby. There would be grocery shopping and laundry, and the 1,000 small tasks that made up their daily life. But tonight, they would grill dinner on the back porch while Noah chased fireflies in the gathering dusk. They would give him his bath together, reading him stories until his eyelids grew heavy. They would talk quietly about their days, about their plans for the nursery, about whether Noah would be excited or jealous when his sister arrived. "You know what I realized today?" Asher said, settling Noah on his hip while Riley started dinner preparations. "What's that?" 2 years ago, I thought success meant building something that would last longer than I did. A company, a legacy, something that would prove I'd been here. He paused, watching Noah stack blocks with intense concentration. "But this family we've built, this is what lasts. Noah will remember the bubbles and the bedtime stories, not the quarterly profits or the board meetings." Riley stopped chopping vegetables and turned to look at her husband. "Any regrets about choosing you and Noah over everything else?" Asher's smile was soft and certain. "Never, not for a single second." As if sensing the importance of the moment, Noah looked up from his blocks and clapped his hands together. "Family," he announced proudly, having recently learned the word. "That's right, baby," Riley said, her heart full to overflowing. "Family." Later that evening, after Noah was asleep and they were curled together on the porch swing that Asher had installed the week they'd moved in, Riley found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them here, the divorce that had seemed like an ending, the pregnancy that had felt like a burden she'd have to carry alone, the slow rebuilding of trust and love that had ultimately made them stronger than they'd been the first time. Penny for your thoughts? Asher asked, his arm tightening around her shoulders. I was just thinking about how different our lives are from what we planned, Riley said. 2 years ago, if someone had told me we'd be sitting here married again with one child and another on the way, I would have thought they were crazy. Good crazy or bad crazy? Riley tilted her head to look at him. This man who'd given up everything he thought he wanted to build the life they actually needed. The very best kind of crazy. Above them, the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the house, their son slept peacefully, safe and loved, and completely unaware of how much his existence had changed the world around him. In 3 months, they would do this all again. The sleepless nights, the overwhelming love, the beautiful chaos of adding another person to their family, and Riley couldn't wait. I love you, Asher Wallace, she whispered into the gathering darkness. I love you too, Riley Wallace, both of you. All of you. Always. The porch swing creaked gently as they rocked together, wrapped in contentment and moonlight, and the quiet confidence that comes from choosing love over fear again and again, until it becomes the foundation of everything you build. In the end, that was all any family really was, a series of choices to love each other through the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones, to show up and stay present, and believe that together, they could weather anything life brought their way. And as the first fireflies began to dance in their garden, Riley knew with absolute certainty that they would. Would you have had the courage to choose love over security, to rebuild trust after such profound betrayal, and to believe that sometimes the most beautiful families are born from the ashes of what seemed like endings? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.